What if more Pokemon got extra forms? There are a bunch of Pokemon out there who have a variety of interesting different forms, so what if more Pokemon got that treatment? Well, I'm going to be looking at what that could look like in today's video, so without further ado, let's get into it. One of the newest forms of Pokemon that have been introduced are convergent form Pokemon. These aren't literal forms per se, but like regional forms, these are meant to be a different variation of an existing Pokemon, so for all intents and purposes, a different form of them. And I thought it would be cool to give a convergent form to Cacnea. This is Cacnea, a normal ghost type who, despite looking a lot like Cacnea, isn't a cactus at all, but is instead a cat. The idea for this came to life because the name Cacnea is literally just one letter off from Cacnea's name, and that is the kind of clever wordplay that we are currently seeing with the names of the existing convergent Pokemon, so it fit right into that concept. It also makes Cacnea into something completely unrelated to itself, which is the entire idea behind convergent Pokemon. However, it does also at the same time maintain a slight bit of connection to Cacnea, because Cacnea is also loosely based around the cactus cat, which is an American folklore creature that is said to be covered in thorns and spines like a cactus. This inspiration is also what accounted for this Pokemon's typing, and while I did feel like it could also just be a pure normal type, I thought the folklore element of the inspiration would reasonably allow for the ghost type to fit in as well, which would then make the Pokemon all the more interesting, which is obviously never a bad thing. And if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to check out my merch store to help continue to make these videos possible. The merch itself is also pretty great too, as we've got plushies and even trading cards of the Fakemon from my videos. The cards are a ton of fun to open. This Rgreywind plush is super soft, squishy, and not to mention spherical, and the Fulkachi plush even comes with a special Fulkachi promo card as well. It's all really cool stuff and helps the channel out tremendously, so be sure to check it out and grab something with the link in the description. And thanks a ton to everyone who has grabbed something already. And now, with that said, let's get back to the video. When you think of Pokemon forms, your mind probably goes first to something like a form change, such as Aegislash and its forms, or perhaps the various different forms of Sawsbuck. That, I would say, is the most traditional type of extra form, so I wanted to make sure I did a couple of those as well. And the first one that I'd like to show off is an unbound form for Spiritomb. In taking a little bit of inspiration from Hoopa and its unbound form, I thought something similar for Spiritomb would be absolutely perfect, because that is pretty much its entire concept. It is meant to be this malevolent Pokemon that has been bound to the odd keystone for its misdeeds, and this is something that is even reflected in the games as well. When you see Spiritomb walk around, you can see how it kinda has to lug the odd keystone around with it, almost as if it's like the classic old ball and chain of a prisoner. So, with this kind of theming in play, one can only think about what it would be like if Spiritomb broke free from the odd keystone. So I feel like giving it an unbound form is actually a really great and fascinating fit. This design is still a Ghost Dark type, but some things about Spiritomb would definitely have to change in this form. First, as an unbound form, and similar to Hoopa Unbound, a sizable stat boost would definitely have to be in order. So, I would bring Spiritomb's base stat total up from 485 to around 550, specifically 558. The reason for that number in particular is because the entire stat boost would actually be going to Spiritomb's speed, which not only is very indicative of the form change itself, since it no longer has to lug around that heavy, odd keystone, but also because speed is Spiritomb's lowest stat, so it desperately needs a buff in that department. Additionally, Spiritomb's stats are also very thematic, as both of its defenses, for example, sit at 108, which represent the number of spirits that make up Spiritomb's body. So, as to not mess with that very specific theming, and to give a rather fitting boost to this Pokemon's speed in a stat that it desperately needs a buff for, its speed stat has simply been raised up to 108 as well, which I feel like overall fits in perfectly with what this Pokemon and this form is all about. And with Spiritomb being such an iconic Pokemon who also doesn't have any kind of extra form to speak of at this point, I feel like this would be a pretty cool form to see. As we get into this next Pokemon, a huge shout out as always goes to my guy Rgreywind for drawing the artwork of these designs, and as always, you can check him out with the links in the description. Amongst all of the various extra forms that we have in Pokemon, arguably the most popular one of them all would have to be the regional variant form, so I knew that I had to cover at least one of those in this video. There are tons of Pokemon out there who could have some amazing regional forms given to them, and one that caught my eye in particular was Furret. This is what I imagine a Furret regional variant could be like, and this form in particular takes Furret from a normal type to an ice type. To me, an Ice-type Furret feels like a good fit all the way around, because number one, it's a substantial change type-wise to the base Furret, which also allows for a substantial change design-wise. Number two, Furret is naturally all about its fur, so an Ice-type variant where it gets even more furry to help withstand the colder temperatures of its new environment just makes a lot of sense. And number three, Furret is a popular Pokemon who also hasn't seen the spotlight since it was introduced in Generation 2. So it's not only due, but it getting a regional variant would definitely make a lot of people happy. As an added bit of detail, the extra furry element of this design was also factored in with more of a literal fur coat motif, as it's meant to look like it's wearing a big fluffy fur coat, as a way to kind of help add a creative layer to the design. I personally think it would be amazing to see Furret get a regional variant someday, and I would be totally down if it looked something like this. When thinking up extra form ideas for this video, I actually thought of something that hasn't been done yet, that would actually be pretty interesting to see in a real game. And that is regular Pokemon that are convergent forms of legendary Pokemon. Having Pokemon that look just like legendaries, but aren't directly related to them and are also just regular old Pokemon, is a really interesting concept in my opinion that almost feels like it could be a cool subplot for a game, or potentially make for some really cool lore for a one-off Pokemon, as it would be a bit of a mystery as to how such a Pokemon even came about. So I decided to go ahead and explore this idea with a design, and Xerneas was the end result. Obviously, this is a convergent form of Xerneas, but like I mentioned, this would just be a regular standalone Pokemon, so it wouldn't be a legendary of its own, and that would kinda be the big mystery about it. Like Cacnea, the whole concept here originates from simply just changing one letter of Xerneas' name, and I feel like from there, the whole design just comes together really, really well. As its name would suggest, Xerneas is a pure grass type, and while it may also look like a deer, it technically isn't one at all, because it's actually based on hedge animals. So despite looking like a deer, it's actually a plant-based Pokemon, which works great with the convergent concept. It also somewhat ties in with Xerneas' lore as well, since in its dormant state, it takes the form of a tree, which maybe could be involved in the lore of why this Pokemon looks so much like Xerneas despite not being related to it and just being a regular Pokemon. So all the way around, I just feel like this concept kinda checks all the boxes to just be a really solid and fun design, and is the kind of thing that personally I think would be interesting to see in a game someday. For this next one, it's not exactly a unique idea, but it is one that is really fun to explore and bring to life with my own interpretation, and that would have to do with Mimikyu. Mimikyu is super popular, obviously, and with its concept revolving around wearing a Pikachu disguise, many fans have dreamed up a number of different concepts for different Mimikyu forms, with it wearing disguises of other Pokemon, which is honestly a great idea. Additionally, it was apparently a thing that Game Freak also considered too, according to information that came out from the Game Freak Terra leak. So apparently, it's not as unrealistic as it might seem either. So with all of that in mind, I thought I would go ahead and come up with my own interpretation of this concept with this Charizard form of Mimikyu. I decided to go with Charizard as the basis for this form, since Mimikyu is all about wanting the spotlight of Pikachu because of its popularity, so another form of it would naturally have to involve another popular Pokemon. I also considered doing an Eevee form because of this, but honestly that just kind of felt way too played out, and while Charizard isn't exactly much better in that regard, it just kind of felt like the next most likely option. With Charizard as my pick though, it also gave me another idea for something that would be cool to do with these forms outside of just their appearance. I think it would be pretty neat to allow each of these forms of Mimikyu to learn exclusive moves that match their disguise. So for example, this Charizard form of Mimikyu would be able to learn a couple of Fire-type moves by level up, while the learn set of the regular Mimikyu could be adjusted so that it could learn a couple of Electric type moves by level up, and then so on if you happen to have different Mimikyu forms from there. I think this would be a really neat and interesting way of further individualizing these forms and also giving each of them some unique utility that separates them from each other, so that their difference isn't purely just cosmetic and actually has a little more substance to it. What do you guys think though? Do you like this Mimikyu form, or any of these other extra forms? And which Pokemon do you think should get a new form? Let me know in the comments, leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe for more because I will be back with another video very soon. Until then, as always, thanks so much for watching this one, I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.